Okay, before I get really stuck into this talk, I'm actually going to preempt it with a bit of an apology, because if any of you lot are anything like me, what I'm about to tell you in the next 5 minutes is going to destroy your ability to be confident in anything you do, ever. Sorry about that. In 1995, a guy called MacArthur Wheeler walked into 2 banks in Pittsburgh and robbed them in broad daylight with absolutely no evidence of trying to disguise himself. Later that day, he was picked up by the police. And when he was shown the security tapes of him robbing the banks, he mumbled in dismay, "But I wore the juice." Turns out MacArthur Wheeler mistakenly thought that if he rubbed lemon juice on his face, he would become invisible to video cameras. Now, this story illustrates a very interesting point. Not only was MacArthur Wheeler too incompetent to rob a bank effectively and get away with it for more than 24 hours, he was blissfully unaware of how incompetent he was. He walked away from those banks thinking he'd done an excellent job. Like this kitten. Oh, I've forgotten what to say next. This in part inspired a team called Dunning-Kruger, who worked at Cornell University, to do some experiments into how people assess themselves. What they did is they gave participants a bunch of tests. Some of them were tests of humour, some of them were tests of grammar, others were tests of logical reasoning. Then after the tests, they asked the participants to kind of guess at how well they'd done, to reflect on their performance in the tests. And something strange seemed to be happening. Almost everyone who came out of tests, whatever the test was, seemed to believe that they were above average. Now, anyone who just has a slight affair with statistics will know that's completely impossible. Now, you can see on this graph that actually the people who were the most wrong about the performance were the people in the bottom quartile. They were massively overestimating their performance, whereas people who were performing well were underestimating themselves. Another test was done specifically on grammar, where participants were asked to identify which sentences were grammatically correct and which ones were incorrect. They were then asked to review their performance. Afterwards, they were then given the other participants' papers. Now, after they saw this, the underperformers, despite seeing the work of people who had outperformed them, still believed that they had done fantastically well. Whereas the people who had done really well saw the bad performance of their peers and realised that actually, I'm pretty good. So they were able to reassess their performance. Whereas those who were incompetent were too incompetent to recognise competence when they saw it. I did this in a night, so I've forgotten what I'm supposed to be saying. Yeah, so this effect can kind of explain certain weird things that you see in culture. There's an idea that's been knocking around for a long time, that the idea that ignorant people are really confident, whereas people who are really capable are actually crippled with a lack of self-esteem and worry all the time and don't go headfirst into jobs that they really could be good at. This could explain comedy characters such as David Brent and Alan Partridge, whose excruciating entertainment stems from the fact that they think they're doing brilliantly well when actually they are acting in completely horrific ways. The comedy comes from the fact that they are completely ignorant of their own ignorance. Because the same skills that it takes to recognise what's a funny joke and what's good comic timing are the same skills it takes to produce these. So these guys have absolutely no idea that they're getting stuff wrong. This also explains why Baldrick frequently thinks he's having a cunning plan. He cannot see the flaws in his own plan. If he could, he wouldn't suggest those plans. The same skills that it takes to construct a cunning plan are the same skills it takes to recognise flaws in your plan. The Dunning-Kruger effect may also explain the type of people that end up in this building. Often the people who will put themselves forward as leaders or hold themselves up as experts are actually woefully incompetent, whereas people who are true geniuses shy away from the limelight, filled with self-doubt. Anyway, so if you found that talk interesting and want to read about the bits that I completely forgot about, then look up Unskilled and Unaware of It by Justin Dunning and David Kruger. It's freely available online and I highly recommend reading it. So there you go, in 5 minutes, a better than average explanation of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Acting.